Well, hey, my friends, I'm so glad that you are with me on the podcast today. You know, we interview artists from all over the world here on the Thriving Christian Artists podcast, but Luke Alsbrook is a friend that's just really right down the road, and so excited to have him here with me today. So, Luke, thanks, man, for being on the podcast.
Awesome. Glad to really super excited.
Absolutely, absolutely. For those folks who are just getting to know you, I know a lot of painters out there will be like, "Oh my gosh, Luke Alsbrook." So many of them will know who you are, but give us an idea of who you are, what you do, where you are in the world, and then we'll kind of jump into some of your backstory today.
Yeah. I live in Waynesville, North Carolina, so a little mountain town, and I've been here since 2004. Married. I have 4 kids. Two of them are in college. The oldest is just newly married, and I'm basically making paintings, and probably most of the paintings I'm making are just going out to galleries that represent me, and then um, other paintings are on commission. But
Yeah,
that's what
yeah,
I'm doing, just painting full time and
awesome.
trying to make ends meet.
You are one of really, honestly, one of my favorite painters. I love your work. Every time I go down to Blue Spiral and see a new piece or something like that, I'm like, oh, I just love what you're doing. But how did
Thanks.
your journey start for you? Did you start painting as a kid, or what was that evolution? How has that been for you?
Yeah, definitely. Um, my parents saw that I liked to draw, early on, and I think when you get accolades for something as a kid, that can be a big motivator. So I think
Sure.
that's probably what started. I did a few exceptional things and started to get some accolades. And I was really fortunate all growing up having great teachers.
Hmm.
So my first teacher was a lady named Gloria Jennings. She had us she had a ginormous file of just pictures from magazine clippings. We'd go through there and pick out a picture of a German Shepherd,
Yeah.
whatever. And you do a painting of it. That was my first teacher. And then mainly through my youth, I was mentored by an artist named Ed Rice, and he was just amazing. And um, he loved to paint from life. He loved to be a student of nature.
Hmm.
He was a great draftsman. Is a great draftsman. Just a great guy. He helped me. My parents have always been super supportive of what I'm doing. Um, yeah, that's kind of how it started. I can keep going with the history. I don't know where you want. What do you want me to talk about?
No, that's great. I mean, did you go to art school and get a degree, or you? How did that work out for you?
Right.
Yeah.
So I definitely wanted to go to a college that was good for painting. And I was, from the very beginning, I've always loved traditional, realistic painting. So I wanted to go somewhere where I could learn that. So I went to Indiana University. They have a reputation for a traditional
Hmm.
painting school. Um, so I went there, and again, great teachers there. There's a lady there named Bonnie Sklarski. She was amazing. And I was doing a lot of landscape painting there. It's Bloomington, Indiana, right in the middle of farmland.
Yeah,
So I was,
gorgeous country.
yeah, yeah. And I think my sophomore year, this lady who is a believer, she basically said, Luke, she told me a few things, but one of the things she's like, you're going to go to the New York Academy. You have to go to the New
Mm.
York Academy. And that just scared me to death. I remember having like nightmares about going to New York City. But I think over the next 2 or 3 years, I got used to the idea, and I got married. I met my wife. She's a pianist,
Mm.
and she was in the music department at IU. So we got married right out of college and moved to New York City. And I went to the New York Academy. And one of the big reasons I went to the Academy is because I don't know if you know, but the New York Academy is all about the figure.
Right.
So it's like you just breathe the figure for 2 years.
Mm.
You build anatomical models, you study perspective. It's like you sculpt from the figure, draw from the figure, paint from the figure. So I felt that was my a weaker area. I was strong in landscape, but I wanted to learn how to do the figure well.
Right.
So New York was like, it was such an adventure for us just to get married and move to New York City. That, you know, I think that shaped our identity, because just not being able to depend on family, just going there as a newly married couple,
Yeah,
like sink or
absolutely.
swim. It was awesome. And again, man, we got into Redeemer Presbyterian Church with Tim Keller, and that was just an amazing church to be a part of.
I'm sure.
Um, so I went to the academy. You know, I should back up just one step though. Did I always want to be an artist? There were a couple crossroads. One big one was in college at IU, and I was considering being a medical illustrator versus fine art. So that was the first big crossroads,
Right.
and that was
Because everybody
scary.
goes through that thing of, do I need to do the practical thing, like to actually make
Yes,
money? Right.
exactly. And no, that's exactly what it was, and that was a serious consideration because I wanted a family. I knew I wanted a family,
Yeah.
and you know, my parents being supportive. I think my parents are even more. I think if anything, they were like pushing me towards the fine art direction. I think they were supportive or whatever, but I think they thought I could do it. So I decided just to go for fine art.
Mm.
Uh, Might have had to do with taking physiology too. That class just about sunk me. Uh, but
I feel the Lord leading in a different direction.
yeah, that's right, man. Exactly.
I love it. I love it. You know,
Now,
as a young man, and you know, all of us go through this. I don't know that it ever ends, but you know, especially as young married couple, you know, you're trying to find your way in the world and that sort of thing. Did you sense early on your art as a really divine calling from God, or was this something that, you know, you had kind of a disconnect between your spiritual life and your art life? Right? When did that begin to kind of connect for you? Because I know that's really a big part of who you are and how you create.
yeah, I think it was always together. It was never a separate thing. Um, I mentioned Bonnie Sklarski at IU. She's was my professor and a believer. And I remember one time in the studio, I was anxious about, I can't remember what, and she said, "Luke, um, she looked at my painting. She said, "Luke, you're going to be doing this for the rest of your life."
Mm,
And it was one of those defining moments where I don't know if it's, I guess it was prophetic in a way, but it's like it was just one of those moments where a person speaks into your life. And so that was kind of a defining moment. But yeah, I always felt that painting was, yeah, was part of a search for truth. Uh, Even being faithful to nature,
mm,
being faithful to what I'm seeing, glorifying what I'm seeing. That all went side by side with ideas in the Christian faith. So yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it
You
was
know, and
more working it out. Like, how am I going to make this work? God, what am I supposed to do? That was the hard part.
sure. So after you finished the academy, I mean, did you guys stay in New York City, or did you move? Because you came to Waynesville, what, 2004? So there's some time in there. What was going on in that time?
Yeah, almost a decade. And now, honestly, that was the difficult part because I had visions of my MFA show and a New York gallery seeing my painting, and like it's like nothing happened.
Mm,
I graduated from the academy. It's like silence. There's nothing happening. And
wow.
my first job, thankfully, was I got on a grand jury in New York City, which was like every morning for a month. So that kind of kept me busy, but nothing happened. And then I think another, just a moment that I'm really proud of when I look back is I was just painting in my studio and painting, in Central Park and stuff. And I mean my studio apartment, in my apartment. But I thought, I should try and teach. That was my next thing. Well, this is how I can support myself and my family. I've got to get into teaching. So I went to the New York Public Library, no internet at that point, and went through all these ginormous books of colleges in the New York
Uh,
area. And I
uh,
started applying for every adjunct position I could. And I got back one response from William Patterson University in New Jersey. And the guy hired me. And I showed up the morning, basically, I showed up to teach. he was looking over my resume, and all of a sudden he goes, "Wait, you never taught before?"
Oops.
It's like, well, I have now.
That's
So
right.
that was
Just give me
another,
a couple hours and I'll have my first class under my belt. Right?
yeah, yeah. But that was huge because like I felt like I had no hope, and I just went in there and just there was no parents to help me. There was no one. It was like on my own, and I just went through those books and applied and landed a job. And I think that it was peanuts
Mm,
in terms of pay,
yeah.
but it got me going. You know, it got me into the art world. It got me teaching, and so after that, I got a studio in Brooklyn. It was just in a warehouse in Brooklyn for, they were like pigeons, and they were actually
And the Raptors.
inside. Yeah. But that was great. It took me like 40 minutes to get out there by subway, but that was my first studio. So I was adjunct teaching, I was painting, I was trying to get into galleries, which was humiliating.
Mm.
Um, the New York gallery scene. Man, there's so many different things I could talk about, but
Well, so what is God saying in the middle of all that? Because you're like, here you are, strung out,
yeah,
doing the best you know how to do, trying to hear God's voice, start a family. Your wife's
yeah,
up there with it. Your family's not anywhere around you. I mean, what is going through your mind? I mean, how is the Lord sustaining you in the middle of that?
yeah. Definitely the verse that comes to mind. Can't remember where it is. You probably know, but it's a verse that says the man goes out with tears, casting seed,
Yeah,
and then he comes back home rejoicing.
yeah,
And somehow I got in my head um, that, look, Luke, this is what God wants you to do. No matter how hopeless or how
mm.
anxious you are, fearful, your job is to cast seed.
Woo.
That's been kind of a guiding star for me in my art career, because there are no rules for a painting career.
Right.
So I just started casting seeds. So if it came to anything like galleries, I just started sending out slides.
Yeah.
I tried cold calling. I would just kept, it's like, and
Anything you
I,
could. Right.
yes, and I didn't look. At a certain point, I got so many rejections. I could actually show you here in my studio. I keep a folder for my kids and my students of all my rejections. It is about an inch and a half thick. Rejections from galleries, from schools, because I'm like applying to get tenure track
Yeah.
teaching jobs. And at a certain point, it's like, I'm not even going to think about if something's going to come back positive, negative. I'm just going to keep casting seed.
Right. Right.
And that was kind of a spiritual um, principle, really, because that has to do with trust. Like,
Yeah.
hold it, this is my part, trust God with the rest.
Yeah.
But I had to put that into practice. So
I love that though. That's the essence of faith, though, right? We're walking. I mean, we have a dream that God's put something on our heart, but we have no idea how it's going to happen. But we know that it will happen because He's walking with us. And that's I think the challenge for all of us, right? To be able to walk in the middle of the darkness. Who was it? Tony Evans that said, "Don't doubt in the darkness what God's told you in the light." I think is
yeah,
what I mean. I love that. We're all having to hold on to those promises. I love, one of the things I love about you, Luke, and we've not spent a huge amount of time together, but you are one of the most humble people that I know, and yet at the same time, one of the most talented and most celebrated artists around. I mean, you've had some major, major accolades in your life, and it'd be so easy, I think, for you to rest on that and to present that when somebody meets you and that sort of thing. And yet that is the furthest thing that comes to my mind when I hear somebody say your name. It's always, man, he is the sweetest guy, the nicest guy. He's so willing to talk and share, and a great person. How are you continuing to believe for growth and believe for accolades and all the things that we want in our art businesses, and at the same time walk humbly with the Lord and with others?
hmm. um, I think um, in terms of the accolades, it's always been a struggle for me to I don't know how else to say it, but maybe people that are listening will identify with it, but just to get in a calm place and
Mm,
paint. Because you can't paint when you're anxious and jazzed up and like up off the ground a little bit. It's like there's something about creativity where you have to be something about you has to be at rest, you
mm,
know? And what I've learned over the years is any successes you have, like let's say, and they're all at their stages, right? It's like the
right.
first time you get represented by a gallery. Well, I've arrived, you know, your first opening, whatever it is, your first museum show. Um, I got to travel with Prince Charles, but anything like that, I found does not help you to get to that place.
Mm,
It's destabilizing. I'm just saying for me, that's what
yeah,
I've experienced.
yeah,
Those kind of successes are destabilizing. And as I've gone on more and more in my career, I just turned 50 a month ago. I know now that the best place to be is, I'm looking at my painting, is like in front of that canvas, or say out in front of a stream, like just me and the canvas, and actually in that place of like, I see that, put it down. I see that, put it down. Wow, like that, it's almost like nothing else matters but that, like getting to that place.
yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's realizing what's important, what
Mm,
makes you feel at peace, what is fulfilling, and what's destabilizing, you know? What can make you um off the ground and not centered,
yeah.
not close to God, where then you run into problems with temptation and yeah. So
Yeah, that's huge. I remember uh, I mentioned before, as we were talking earlier, our friend Michael Sherrill, who's incredible sculptor. I remember when he spoke at our Gathering of Artisans conference years ago and talked about this kind of retrospective of his career and the awards and getting in the Smithsonian and winning this or winning that and that sort of thing. And he
yeah,
said, I remember, I never forget. He said, you think when you get in the Smithsonian, like, I'm never going to have to sell a piece again. Like, it'll be lines of people that will be, coming to buy my work. And it's like, oh, this sort of thing.
yeah,
And yet that's not what happens. The next day you go back to doing what you do. And
yeah,
it's one part of the journey. I've, had some of that in my life. You've had that in your life. And I
mm,
really I appreciate that. It really comes back to, who does God say that I am? I'm going to get in the sweet space in the studio and do the thing that I know, and that's where the
what
grace
I was
is.
made to do. I'm actually walking in his path when I'm in the right place, doing what I'm supposed to be
Yeah,
doing.
yeah,
Um, I was gonna say too, you said about I've definitely had the same experience. Like I get some magazine article and you think this is gonna change everything. There's something about, again, this is just my experience. That does not that doesn't really have anything to do with your sales. The only thing that has to do with your sales is you create a great painting, a beautiful painting, it hangs in a gallery, somebody sees it and goes, wow, I've got to have that.
yeah,
That's what makes a sale.
yeah,
And I've never seen any of those other things, I don't think, have any huge impact on sales per se.
yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. I guess it could. I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Now, I always love to ask people from a business standpoint. Lots of people do different things to make a life as an artist. You mentioned just turning 50, 4 kids, couple in college. Like
Yeah.
everybody, trying to make it and do the thing. So, does your business look like as far as how you're working it out every day, making a living as an artist, and how has that changed over the years as you've evolved into who you are now?
Yeah, let me go back to that. Again, I was a decade in New York City,
Yeah,
and during that time, most of it, I was just killing it trying to get a tenure track job. I thought that's how was my only chance to make a living.
mm.
And when we were in New York, I had our first 2 kids, so my wife did, and we were in a 1 bedroom apartment and we had 2 closets and the 2 kids were sleeping in the closet. So like that's pressure, man. I'm like, how am I gonna? And my wife had been working, but she stopped working. It's like man, it was a lot of pressure.
Yeah,
What happened with me? I never got one of those tenure track jobs, but all the time my paintings were selling more and more.
yeah,
So at a certain point, I just found myself where I was. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, I my best chance of making a living is just to paint.
Yeah.
And I started to realize too, like, look, I'm not cut out for academia. I would have been walking around with a ginormous like target on my back, and it's like I'm glad I didn't go that way.
Yeah.
So it just kind of worked out that way. So as I am now, I'm kind of doing the same thing that I'm doing that I did when had left New York, which is I'm just painting, and I've gotten more and more galleries that and more reputable galleries that represent my work, and I'm just painting and sending those paintings out to galleries. And I go through phases, but say maybe 20-30% of my painting time is from maybe commission work. Somebody wants a portrait or a landscape from where they grew up or something,
Yeah.
Um, but it's mostly just going out, asking myself, well, I'm getting into some different issues, but yeah, just painting and then sending it to galleries. That's what I'm doing professionally.
Yeah. Well, you kind of mentioned, maybe this is a nice way to kind of wrap up our time together, but you mentioned loving being on site, painting, and that sort of thing. I know right
Yeah,
now you're working on I think 120-year-old farm and that sort of thing. And
yeah,
when I think of your work and some of my favorite of your pieces, it's these old farms, it's these Western Appalachia landscapes and that
yeah.
sort of thing. What about that setting really lights your fire creatively? And then maybe talk about this project that you're on right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because I was gonna say, when I think about what I love to paint, I do paintings out of my head and in the studio. In those paintings, I ask myself a question like, if I could do one painting in the world, what would it be?
Mm,
Okay, maybe it's Jesus washing the disciples' feet, or a home at twilight, or whatever. I ask myself that question. If I could only do one, what would it be?
yeah,
Now, painting on the landscape's a little bit different. I'll just wander. I'll wander around till I find a locale. And I used to get to know the farmers there, whatever. And that's more like I'll walk around a new farm. And the one I'm on right now it's a 120-year-old dairy farm. It's kind of like a lot of farms in Appalachia, it's kind of fallen into disrepair, but it's just, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. And I'm looking for that moment. I'm just walking around and all of a sudden I'll just see a scene. I'll compose it. And it's like,
there it
as
is.
soon as that moment happens, it's like the painting is done in my book.
Yeah,
It's like I found it. All I've got to do is be faithful and put the work in and just copy what I'm seeing,
yeah.
or try and capture what I'm seeing. Um,
Now, will you do the whole piece right there on site, or will you photograph it and bring it back for reference, or continue to go back to that same spot? Or I mean, what does that look like for you as you're creating?
well, you're out in nature, which is unpredictable.
Right.
So bottom line, if I can be out in front of it, out there, I would much rather be right there. But the season's changing, the light's changing,
Sure.
stuff happens. And so yeah, I'm using photographs, studies, memory, all that. But if I can possibly be there and paint on site from life, that's what I want. And probably the best comparison is that's the same thing I want with my relationships. Like talking on the phone, texting with somebody, it is not even this.
Yeah.
It's not the same as if Matt was in the room with me. It's
Yeah.
like that's reality. There's nothing that's irreplaceable.
Yeah. And
Kind
I
of,
think I have to say, as you're saying that, I think when I see your work, there is that intimacy of
mm,
connection that you feel when you see that.
mm.
I'm thinking of this one that hung at Blue Spiral forever. I don't know who bought it. I was like, I should have bought it, but it was, I remember it was this old kind of broken down farmhouse, and the way the light and the way you positioned it. I mean, you just felt this intimacy. And I think that's the beautiful thing about, I think what God's doing in and through you, Luke, is that, the same intimacy that you long for relationally is showing up in the work that
Huh.
you create. And people feel that, people feel
Oh,
that. So
appreciate that.
yeah,
Yeah. Well,
absolutely.
I'm certainly, when I'm there, it almost becomes like that place becomes almost sacred to me. I'm so in love with it.
Mm,
So yeah, if I can if the person that's looking at pain can feel a little bit of like what I'm experiencing looking at it, then that's what I want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, you are doing some incredible work and much, much, much more to come. But I'm just honored that you would take time with us today. Also, want to let everybody know Luke is going to actually be one of our keynotes at Gathering of Artisans in 2022. All those details will be coming out in the spring. And so be looking for that. But we're so excited to have you there and just sharing more about your journey and see some of your work. But tell everybody where they can get in touch with you online, because I know folks that may not be familiar with you are going to definitely want to connect online and follow your work.
Yeah, I mean, kind of everywhere. I've got a website, lukeallsbrook.com, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I've got a YouTube channel. So I
Awesome.
think once you get into one place, it connects everywhere else.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Well,
Matt,
hey,
it was
Luke.
such a pleasure talking to you, man.
Oh,
I really appreciate it.
likewise. Thanks so much for being on today, man. Appreciate it.
All right.